Let me introduce the players in the first inning here. We've got Stewart Orden, who is a defense attorney at home base with us. At loudmouth number 1, we have Sean Asile. Is that proper, Sean?
Asile.
Asile? All right. You're a Manhattan lawyer.
Manhattan Lawyer Magazine.
Manhattan lawyer, right. That's what I mean. Manhattan Lawyer Magazine. I mean, one of the best, right?
That's right.
None of them. They've got Catherine Brady, was the author of Father's Day. But I want to start with Stewart first. You recently defended Dong Lu Chen.
That's right.
Who brutally murdered his wife with a hammer and got off with only 5 years probation. How on earth did you manage that one?
Well, let me correct one thing right away, Mort. He didn't murder his wife. He was convicted only of manslaughter in the second degree.
So that means she's still alive?
No, he was convicted of a homicide.
Of a homicide, okay.
He was convicted of a homicide, not of murder. He was charged with murder. He was brought to trial. The verdict was manslaughter in the second degree.
Have any pictures of how she looked after the hammer? We couldn't show those? Okay, all right, okay. Go ahead. I just want to find out what the difference between manslaughter and murder is.
Well, there are 3 degrees there, but he was convicted of manslaughter in the second degree, which is an unintentional killing.
How many times did he hit her with a hammer?
The medical examiner said there were 8 skull fractures.
Unintentionally hit her 8 times. Okay. Oh, wait a second. I'll buy that. I really want to know how Stewart pulled this one off. I mean, this is a Houdini act.
What you have to understand, Mort, is my client was a tormented individual, came to this country in 1986 with his wife and family. Based on his wife's instructions, he lived in Maryland because she told him that was the only place he could find a job. During that time, she refused to have him move back to the city, telling him he couldn't find employment here.
Where was she, down there?
She was in New York City living with the 2 children.
Oh, she lived up here?
She refused to have him come back to New York. On 2 occasions, when he returned to New York, she refused to resume what had been a normal marital relationship.
Means she wasn't having sex with him.
That's right. Oh. He became suspicious, which all of us might have done. He eventually moved up to New York, and in the last 2 months prior to the incident, she again, despite his living with her again, refused to resume.
For 2 months, he lived with her and
the family, correct. And
how old was she?
She was 44.
Oh, well, that's it.
He was 51. He became more suspicious, became obsessed, was tormented. Gradually, he already had psychiatric problems previously in China. And through this great torment, confronted her.
Red China, Nationalist China, People's Republic.
People's Republic of China. Mm-hmm. He was literally obsessed, tormented, began hearing voices, thought he heard the voice of his wife's lover talking to him.
Did he know his wife had a lover?
Eventually, she confirmed this to him, and the night before the incident occurred, she taunted him with that fact. And
in what way?
Basically saying things like, so what? If I found another man, I'll have nothing to do with you again. So what? You know, what are you going to do about it? The next morning, argument continued, and he finally snapped. And when I say snapped, he no longer had control. His mental state was such that he was simply, as his son described upon arriving home and finding his mother dead in the bedroom, saw his father, described him as being out of his mind, not there, not the person he knew.
So was your defense then temporary insanity?
No, it was not temporary insanity.
Well, it seems that you've described a classic example of temporary insanity. Why didn't you use that as a defense?
The problem with temporary insanity, or an insanity defense in general, is that it's an affirmative defense. And I would have then had to prove something to the trier of fact in this case. It was a court trial. Judge, no jury. And I had an affirmative obligation at that point to prove something. The defense I used was one of extreme emotional disturbance, but beyond the normal definition of what that is commonly considered to.
Didn't you really go back and show that in the culture this gentleman had been raised in for his first 42 years of his life, indeed, it was very common and normal if a wife cheated on her husband, that the husband could kill the wife?
No, that's not true.
You didn't do that?
That's not true. I did rely heavily on his cultural background, which, in fact, as I understand it through the expert in this case, Chinese culture is such that the family is a sacred institution in China. Mm-hmm. And when one party, whether it be the man or the woman, commits an act of adultery, which is still a crime in China, in fact, casual sex is still a crime in China, that is such a stain on the marriage, especially to the man because he no longer can manage his household. The shame and humiliation extends through the generations. And that was used merely to show the exacerbation.
This is the biggest bunch of pablin puking I've ever heard in my life.
And I think what Catherine is saying, Stewart, if we're going to offer everyone a defense in any crime that they commit after they've chosen this as their country of residence, we're going to allow them to escape back to their normal sociological or societal habits of another nation. We're a nation without laws.
Every case has to be judged on the individual circumstances. This wasn't, and the judge never considered, and it was never argued, that this is okay to do in China, to kill your wife as a result of an accident.
The guy lives here, not China.
Somewhere down the line...
Mort, if I can just say, I think the judge made the wrong decision for a lot of the right reasons. I mean, let's take what he said, right? You treat somebody according to the culture they come from. Well, if Solomon Rushdie is whacked outside of B. Dalton's tomorrow, and some Iranian hitman comes up into court and says, oh, in my culture, this would have sent me to heaven. According to the judge's decision, all right, we'll drop him, from murder 2 down to man 2, and I'll send you off on probation. But let me just say, you try a case as an attorney, and the judge listens to a case on the facts of the person before him. Now, you had 2 probation officials saying the guy was so meek that chances are before he served the first year, he'd be off in prison. All right, you had the boy's son stand up and say, I want my father back. Now, presumably, he has heard his father admit to murdering his mother. He wants the father back at home. And in the courtroom, you had a dozen members of the guy's family sitting there crying for him to be sent home. Now, the judge, and I was there, the judge saw all of this, he heard all of this, and he sentenced for the facts of the case. I don't think he sat in his office and said, I'm going to make law. Geez, I'm an intelligent guy. I mean, he was sentencing for the facts of this case.
He should know that the Chinese community in this country is upset by his decision.
He didn't punish according to the severity of the crime. I mean, that's what's wrong with the system. And I know one thing, Mort, I watch your show regularly. You and I agree on this. The system sucks. And in order to change it, we can't let this kind of stuff get by. It would have been like letting Joel Steinberg get off for killing little Lisa Steinberg, the 6-year-old. He didn't get enough punishment. He didn't get enough punishment, but he got some punishment.
Well, more importantly, Nussbaum got none because it was agreed that she had been, abused herself. Never really coming out as a fact that she was the one who introduced drugs into that family, which later created abuse. I mean, we are seeing such usurpation of the public's right to be protected from these people that it's I can see why the public gets upset.
Well, you should understand this, as Mr. Sale just said. There was a three-month time period between the time of the verdict, for which he could have been sentenced to a jail term in prison, and he did serve 1.5 years in prison. 3 months from the time of verdict to the time of sentence. Now, I can bring to the attention any facts I want to the court. The district attorney can bring to the attention any of the facts that they wish to forward to the court as relevant for sentencing, and the probation department, and the family, who are extended victims in this case. When we proceeded to sentence 3 months later, the probation department, after an unusually long investigation, recommended probation. The family recommended probation. The children recommended probation. Department of Health in New York City.
The victim's family, what they recommend?
The victim's family, as far as I know, there are none other than her children. But you've got to understand there was a daughter, an 18-year-old daughter who had nothing to do with this, a 16-year-old son who had nothing to do with this. They recommended probation, and the district attorney's office brought no information. No one from the community. They had 3 months to find this out if there was somebody out there.
Waiting for him to kill somebody
I think I agree. I think I agree with Stewart in the sense that every case, Catherine, is a different case. But I wonder what kind of a message we send to the American people when this happens. This man gets 5 years probation. And in the other instance where we know the wife took the combat position, shot her husband point blank with a .357 Magnum in the stomach, and she spent 75 minutes in jail. I mean, we're sending bad messages. I guess we have to say, when is a killer not guilty, even if he admits to killing? And we'll find that out next. Stay with us. Stewart, before we move on to another segment of the program, let me ask you about how far are you going to be willing, and other lawyers going to be willing to go with this sort of cultural defense? I mean, are Irishmen going to get off because we supposedly drink more? Are Italians going to get off because they belch in your face more? I mean,
Rapists.
what's going to happen?
Go as far as I
Rapists and
can.
incest perpetrators.
I got to go through walls for my client. That's my job.
You're going to go all the way?
All the way.